Hello, trumpet players. Got a new video for you, and this one is talking about swinging lead players. I don't know what else to call it besides that, so let's get into this. So I have a little handy dandy sheet here, and at the very top I put a post-it reminding me to dedicate this video to Jimmy Brennan. And Jimmy, if you are still alive, I don't know, I'm sorry, that sounds weird, right? But I'm very bad at keeping in touch. If you are still alive and you hear this or watch this video is partly inspired by you. We'll talk about you deeper into it. But I wanted to dedicate this video to you. All right, so we're going to start off with my lead trumpet story. Originally, I was not a lead trumpet player because I could not play above the staff at all. So all my jazz experience was as the solo player in the band. That's going back to the early 80s. I think I started playing jazz in 1979. But I never had range. And those of you who know my story, now part of this story, I like telling my story, right? Because it's a different story depending on what the context of what we're talking about is. Now we're talking about lead trumpet playing. It's sort of the same story with a different twist, right? And I enjoy, it's not that I enjoy talking about myself, but I enjoy these nuances, right? So, it's the same story I've told you guys before, but now we're talking about lead playing. I've never really, on this channel, I've never really talked about lead playing before. So in the earliest part of my career, I couldn't play lead because I didn't have the chops for it. I didn't even have a reliable high C. And, you'll hear me later say that you don't have to have great chops to be a great lead player, but you do need to be able to play above the staff for most gigs, right? For most bands, you do at least need to be able to play over the staff. And by the way, there's a threshold. I've been working with students all these years. There's a threshold at G. Once you get over that threshold, everything starts to get easier. Now, there are people that get stuck at random notes above high C. I know why that happens. If you're having that trouble, give me a call. I know why that happens. But normally most people just get stuck at G. That's the biggest one. Once you get past that, everything is usually okay. So, well, my story goes back to high school. I never had chops to begin with. I didn't start getting chops until my infamous crash and burn scenario in college. That happened, I think, my third or fourth year in college. I won't go into that story now because it's not relevant. But I had a crash and burn scenario. How I responded to that crash and burn scenario is what led me to have the chops to be a lead player. I actually believe that if it hadn't been for me crashing and burning, the good things that came out of that would have never happened. I actually truly believe that. Now, let's say, as part of this story, that I was blessed in those years that I didn't have chops to play in an ensemble, in ensembles, where the lead player was a great lead player. So there's three of them. Actually four if you want to, but no, it was three. You know what? Let's add the fourth one to the list. So chronologically speaking, Roger Morgan, who is still a lead player today, amateur lead player in, I guess he's more pro now that he's older. And I think he still works, but I think he plays more professionally now than he used to. In El Paso. Then there's Leslie Thompson, who I don't think he's a drummer now, but he was also a very good lead player. And then we had my good friend Mike Middleton at college, and then after Mike we had Tommy Frogger. All of these guys, great trumpet, great lead players, to sit under at the university, high school and university level. So I had that as models for me to follow later. Don't get me wrong, I later had better models to follow, professional models to follow, people with decades and decades of experience. But I don't think my understanding of what those guys were doing would have been so good. And by the way, also, while we're talking about this, I want to mention, I'm going to talk about him later in the video, but I want to also mention at this point Sam Trimble, because Sam Trimble is the one who taught us, and I'll talk more about this later in the video, but right now we're talking about my story. Sam Trimble is the one who taught us what great lead trumpet playing was. So we'll talk more about that later too. Okay, so after the crash and burn, and when I finally got my chops, my first Super C was on a Baptist orchestra gig in 1989. It took me, so crash and burn, I changed my chops, and slowly developing higher range, higher range, higher range, higher range. And then my first public, not my first Super C, my first public Super C was on that gig. Daryl Bear said, "Hey, Eddie, do you think you can take that stinger up an octave?" And of course I could. So I did. And it was, I think we played that show uh, probably about 8 or 9 times. I don't remember exactly. I didn't miss it once. It was just a stinger, just a single Super C, beep, right? And that was 1989. So obviously by that time, I had the chops to play lead. And all of my gigs, even up to now, and we'll talk about that too, even up to now, the gigs I get are gigs that I get because I play lead and jazz. Okay, but now, so, after I developed my chops, I started playing, I started getting hired for Latin gigs. That's a lead gig, right? Whether it's salsa, Mexican music, Tejano. By the way, just so you know, I'm on almost a dozen different Tejano albums, and one of them even got a Grammy. A lot of people don't know that about me. It's weird because my experience as a salsa player is much deeper than my experience as a Tejano player. My Tejano career was only like 3 or 4 years long. My salsa career was 20 years long. I practically made a living playing salsa for that 20 years, practically. I mean, if you looked at the percentage of income, most of my income in those years came from salsa gigs. But I'm not on a single, not to my knowledge, I'm not on a single salsa album, which is weird, right? All the other styles I play, I'm on plenty of albums. Um, but the salsa thing, it never really. I think maybe because most of the salsa gigs I did, I was never part of a band or anything like that. I was in pickup bands that played for famous artists. So what I did get out of my salsa time, my 20 years of salsa, what I did get was a long, long list of famous salseros that I worked with. So anyway, so this is all to tell my lead trumpet player story. As a trumpet player playing salsa, I was a lead player. It was extremely rare for me to play the second part. Extremely rare that, for that matter, to have two trumpet parts, if I remember right. Um, a lot of times it would be trumpet, sax, and trombone. So, what I liked, one of my favorite bands to play with, and I played with them about 4 times, was they had 4 trumpets. You know, there's several. If I'm not mistaken, there's several salsa bands that have 4 trombones. What's the name of the band I was with? Conjunto? Um, Conjunto Chane. I played 4 times with them. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, they're considered salsa romantica, if I'm not mistaken. But that was some wonderful playing. I played lead trumpet with them, I think, 4 different times. But yes, the salsa career I had um, was basically pickup band stuff that I did featuring famous artists that would come in from out of town. We would have one night and then they would leave, and then the next week we would play with some other famous people. Some of the famous people that I played with, my favorite out of all of them was the albino guy. I'm forgetting his name now. Um, but he was my favorite. They would the guys would say that was puro salsa, pure salsa, and he would do the improvisation stuff when they had the chorus and the improvisation part. He actually did improvise, and he'd be telling stories to the audience while he's singing, made up stories on the spot. So, um, so that was the salsa tradition. That's how things used to be. So, uh, I forget his name. I played with him once again, I think between 4 to 6 times, and he was my favorite. I've got albums of his. I apologize for not remembering the name. Those of you who listen to salsa would remember. Uh, well, he is the only famous albino guy. Um, then there's also the Fania All Stars guy that we played with. That was a big deal. I'm having a difficulty remembering the names right now. I have most of those names listed on my website. You have to dig deep to find it, but it's the names are listed there. Um, the reason you have to dig deep is I don't believe in riding on other people's coattails. Most musicians, that's how they do it. They list all the famous people they played with so that you'll go, ooh, ah, right? They want you to be impressed with them. I don't want you to be impressed with who I played with. I'm using it now because that's part of the story. There's a reason why I don't stress that stuff. I don't stress it on my books. I don't stress it when I'm advertising for lessons. I don't stress all of that. I don't even stress another thing that teachers do. I know I'm on a tangent. I apologize. Another thing that teachers do is they tell you all the famous people that they used to teach. I don't do that. That's not how I want you to come to me. I want you to come to me because you've discovered that what I teach works. All that other stuff is manipulative. It's meant to manipulate you into saying, oh, this guy must be good. I should sign up with him. No, I would rather be honest than to manipulate you. Okay? My cat keeps coming around the corner, staring at me. Like, who are you talking to? Anyway, so let's move on. I also had a taste of being a lead trumpet player in the big band era. Now, I consider the big band era to be something different from what we grew up calling stage band. Stage band, you play concert music. Big band, you play dance music. And I did a little bit of lead playing with the stage band stuff. I was the lead player for the Texas Music Festival Jazz Band. I did that for, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years. I was the lead player many times for the Kima Jazz Festival main big band. I think they called it the HPMA Jazz Band, named HPMA being the musicians union here in Houston. I was the lead player for that. And I want to tell you this, and this is part of the story. For about 20 years, Dennis Dotson, who was as far as jazz players go, I respect Dennis more than anybody else in town, who's alive right now, right? And when Barry Lee was still alive, I respected him almost as much as Dennis. Only reason I'm not saying more is that I didn't get to know him as well as I got to know Dennis. And so Dennis and I'm not going to say we're best buddies because I'm not a very good friend. I don't mind admitting that. So no, I'm not a very good friend to him. He's a better friend to me than I am to him, and I openly apologize for that. But I respect him tremendously, right? And so Dennis, for I think about 20 years, was referring me as a lead player, and he told me specifically, and we're going to talk about this in the video. I hope I don't have to stop it and start a new video. Dennis told me that the reason why he was referring me was because of my swing feel. And we're going to talk more about that later. It's the next on my list. I got a little list of what I want to talk about. And we're going to talk about that later. Dennis would hire me and refer me because of my swing feel, and that went on and I'm talking about the lead part. By the way, it was Dennis and Bob Morgan that got me started, and also Buddy for that matter, that got me started with the big band guys. Dennis and Buddy heard me see my path to the big band stuff was through the Latin stuff. My first gigs were Latin. I played with a Mexican band for a year, and that led to the salsa stuff, and the salsa stuff led me to the jazz guys. Kind of weird, huh? And so when I met Dennis, now I met Dennis at a jam session, but that's the flow what I just described. That's how things developed. And Dennis is the one who spoke. Oh, I left the part out. So there was a big band in town, Ricky Diaz, and he played in his big band some of the Latin stuff. And since I was connected to the salsa community, when he needed a big band, that's the first big band I was working with, and Dennis and Buddy Cisco were in that band. And so for the other big bands, Dennis and Buddy both said, hey, we've been referring you. So my path to get to the big band stuff, and I was saying earlier, I got to have a little piece of the last of the big band era. That's what I was trying to say earlier. I got to have a little piece. Those gigs are gone for the most part. And I think it's because the people who wanted that music are gone. But I got to have a piece of that. So the big bands that were still playing true big band music back then were hiring me to play lead. And I'm going to say it one more time. That's because Dennis Dotson liked my swing feel. Now, let's talk about what is swing feel. Because, some people, I've heard people say this in Houston, that the way I played, I still play that way. The way I play lead is black. That's what people have told me. They told me, and I've gotten this from local people. There's a story I used to tell. Maybe I'll put it on video one day. With a band from New Orleans, that the dude asked me, "Are you sure you ain't black?" Right? But here's the thing. And by the way, some people think I play this way because I used to play with Connor Johnson, but no, the reason I play with that swing feel goes back to my days in El Paso. Because we were told, now I'm bringing Sam Trimble back up again. This is what Sam Trimble taught us, and I think maybe also Al Mendez, my jazz band director in high school, maybe he taught us the same thing. Never do nothing with the note. And that's not just the lead. This is the same reality for all jazz, and for that matter, all music, all styles of music. The golden rule: never do nothing with the note. And we're going to talk about why some players today break that rule. Okay, so when you apply that, let's talk about what is swing. When Dennis Dotson says, you have a great swing feel, this is not what the jazz educators teach. Oh, swing is a triplet rhythm. Wrong answer. Swing is not a triplet rhythm. I like to say that swing is lopsided. Because why do I say that? In the old days of Finale is a music writing software. They have playback, right? If you set the rhythm to triplets, it does not sound like swing. Here's what happens. The swing is a little less lopsided the faster you go, in terms of the rhythm. So if you're playing a ballad, that triplet might actually be a true triplet. The faster you go, so like for a medium swing, that's not a real triplet. And if the way you're trying to swing is by looking for some sort of ratio between the notes, that's not going to fly. Because that ratio is changing. It's a moving target. So that doesn't work. So swing, and by the way, that's not what swing is. I like to teach swing as a meter and an articulation. More importantly, the meter, because you can articulate the right way and not get the right meter, and it's still not swinging. So more importantly, it's the meter. Now, what do we mean by meter? In the jazz world, we would use the word groove, the feel. But what feel are we talking about? I like to use the word meter. Strong beats and weak beats. So emphasis. Where is the emphasis? And what is the division of the beat? Strong beats and weak beats, which is the emphasis on which notes get the emphasis. And how is the beat divided? That's what swing is. So swing has certain emphases and a certain rhythmic feel. Okay? Now the part that's missing out of some lead players' playing is those emphases. Now, I'm gonna edit this and show you on the screen right now. This is the shape that I was taught. It looks sort of like a Christmas tree or a rocket. But this is one of the shapes, note shapes. So by the way, part of what we're talking about could be called note shapes. This is true for all music. Every note must have a shape. And rectangle is not, to me, rectangle notes are not notes. They don't have any style. Unless your quote-unquote style is that you don't have a style, then that's the only way I could say, yes, that's a style. Not having any style whatsoever could be a style. Artistically speaking, you could have a blank canvas and say, oh, that's my work of art. But no, to have that swing feel that I'm talking about, you have to have note shape. That note shape puts the emphasis on different notes. You don't have emphasis without shape. You don't have emphasis without shape. If you don't have the emphasis, then you don't have the swing. Because the nature of the swing is the emphasis. It's not the rhythm. And this is where a lot of, I think a lot of times the reason why people play the way they do today is because jazz education said that swing was a rhythm. But swing is not a rhythm. Swing is a groove, a meter, a time feel. And in order to distinguish a rhythm from a meter is rhythm with emphasis. My alarm is about to go off. I think what I'm going to do is pause the video and come back and finish it up because I have to put some bread in the oven. All right, so let's pause this. All right, I'm back. So it was Sam Trimble who taught me to play this way. And when I got to Houston, that was a valuable thing. I don't think it's valuable anymore. But yes, I remember Sam Trimble, that pattern that I showed you, that shape, that note shape that I showed you. Um, I'll show it here again. This shape here, this is something that Sam Trimble in our jazz band class put on the chalkboard. What I find most amazing about this, and I think I've said this before on one of my YouTube videos, what I find most amazing about that is that this was before digital technology. That shape that he put on the chalkboard is exactly what it looks like on digital. Uh, if like right now I'm looking at on the wall over there as my monitor, I can see the shape of my all the words that I'm saying, right? Because it has that graph type thing on the screen. But what Sam Trimble was showing us was a whole decade. No, actually more than a decade. Like almost 2 decades before the digital technology came out and was being used by everybody. So they obviously knew what they were talking about. Now, some people would say that because I told you about the Conrad Johnson Orchestra, right? Some people thought that the reason I played like that was because I played with Conrad. I played 2 stints with Conrad Johnson. If you're not familiar with that name, look for a documentary online. I believe it's called Thunder Soul. This is a documentary about Conrad's high school band. I was not in his high school band. I was in his professional band. And I did 2 stints with the band. One stint was earlier, like when I first got into Houston. I was at a jam session. Conrad heard me play, liked the way I played, and invited me to come out and play with his band, and I loved it. The only reason why I quit his band is because the rehearsals were on Tuesdays, and that was my, you guys know my system. I try to practice on Tuesdays more than every other day. And I was having difficulty getting everything done on Tuesdays, so that's the one thing I had to give up. It was something it was very reluctant. I didn't want to give it up, but I had to make that system work, and that's what I had to give up. But the thing is, I already had that swing feel before I got there. Now, some people might say, if they knew my story, that Sam Trimble was influenced by Conrad Johnson, because Trimble said to me, Trimble told me about Conrad Johnson before I got here. Because Trimble was a judge at some of the contests that Conrad Johnson's band had won. And so, yes, Trimble, I remember Trimble telling me about this great jazz band in Houston, and about Conrad Johnson. So it was kind of a small world thing, right? Me finally playing with, but the truth is, Trimble's swing, Trimble's approach to swing goes back farther than that. Trimble was in the Kenton band and played with Kenton before he started his masters. And so I think that swing feel was something he had all along. And I got it from him, and Now, also, let's not dismiss listening. All of the lead players I enjoy listening to are the old timers. And I think this is the way the old timers play, with that kind of swing feel. I'm going to tell you one more time. It has to do with note shape. Yes, there's a rhythmic aspect. There is a rhythmic aspect, but that rhythm is nothing. It's flat. The word is flat. And you know what? I love this analogy. I've told you guys what Abraham Chavez told us. He said every piece of music has a character, and you don't do that character justice until you bring that character to life. The whole objective is to put life in your music. And if these notes don't have shape, that piece of music is dead. I love that analogy. That second part is mine. Right? He's the one that Abraham Chavez said, is the one that said every piece of music, the character in that music should come to life. Right? I'm the one that said, looking at the note shape, because when you have great trumpet playing, it's like this on the screen, like a heartbeat. If you don't have that shape, it's like this, like a flat line. Okay, so that's my contribution to Abraham Chavez's quote. Without that note shape, your music is dead. This is just as true outside of lead playing as it is within lead playing. And when we say one lead trumpet player swings harder than another lead trumpet player, or when we say that one lead trumpet player swings harder on one song than he does on another song, we are not talking about the rhythm. We are talking about the emphasis and the note shape. The more exaggerated the note shape, the harder the swing. I'm going to say it one more time. The more, because we do have, that's a term in the jazz world, right? Oh man, that dude swings hard. They'll either say hard or heavy. He's got a heavy swing, he's got a hard swing. Swing harder. They're not talking about the rhythm. They're talking about this emphasis. The more exaggerated the emphasis is, the more exaggerated the note shape is, the harder the swing is. So let's talk about today why some lead players don't have a better swing feel. That's one very simple answer. This is pause for effect, right? I want you to try to think. Ask yourself the question right now. What is that one thing? What's the one thing that makes most modern lead players not swing? And I'm not going to say who does and who doesn't. I have heard some of the youngsters here in Houston. By the way, Um, I don't play as much lead as I used to. I'm not upset about that. I never really liked it. It's something I did to make a living. Um, I do have this, it's kind of weird, right? Because I never really liked playing lead. Um, I do know that if it wasn't for the lead playing, most of the gigs I had, I wouldn't have gotten them. I do know that. Um, I had a unique ability to play lead and the jazz stuff on the same gig. That's what got me going. In the beginning, why some people would hire me instead of some other people was because um, I had the chops. You know, they were condensing the big band stuff, and they were making the lead guy play the solo too. And I could do that without getting tired. I think that's the biggest reason why I was playing those gigs. Is because I could do all of it and not get tired. I had the chops for it. And I could do it well. Anyway, back to the you know, um so I don't get as many lead gigs now because there's a bunch of great lead players in town. Some of them do play with at least a bit more swing feel than most of them. Most of the youngsters, I'm going to say about, I'm doing it this way because you guys know I don't like to put people down. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here, I actually hope some of the people who don't swing hear this video and start swinging. That's my hope. So I'm not putting them down at all. They have to decide for themselves, are they swinging enough? Are they swinging hard enough? So let's talk about real quick, what is that one thing? Now that you've been asking yourself that question long enough, what is the one thing that causes these people, these lead trumpet players, to not swing? The answer is they play too loud. That's the answer. And a lot of people get angry with me when I bring this up because they think I'm just complaining about the volume. But I'm not complaining about the volume. I'm complaining about the lack of style. I'm complaining about the lack of swing. I'm complaining about the lack of note shape. To me, because of my education, to me, because of my background and my experiences, when you play without note shape, I find it offensive. It's ugly. It's terrible music. It's disgusting. I can't stand to hear it. When you play without note shape, it's just notes, and I find that offensive. And this is true for all types of music. But it's worse for the lead players. Now, let's talk about how this happens. If you play, quote unquote, as loud as you can, there is no note shape. It's impossible to play with note shape at all, of any sort. If you're playing as loud as you can, That's like, imagine that that your volume level is a boulder that you're going to chip away until you have a sculpture inside of it. The rock inside is the sculpture. So there's a piece of art inside of that boulder. This is like saying, there's the boulder, that's my piece of art, without any chipping away whatsoever. The amount of time you spend playing at your full volume on any given note should be a very small fraction of that note. Without contrast and dynamic contrast within the note, that's what note shape is. We're talking about the dynamics of the note itself. That's why we talk about emphasis. There's an emphasis at the beginning of the note, if that's appropriate. There's the growing of the note, the swelling of the note. There's the flare of the note at the end. Depending on the style. Not everything is like that, but yes. Depending on the style. You do, let's say the rule we were taught again, never do nothing with the note. When you play too loud, you push the volume up to your limit, making it impossible to put any shape on the note. And it comes out. Ba, 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 ba. That's not music. Just like putting a boulder in the middle of a room, that boulder, unshaped, is not a sculpture. That's not art. You shape it into a piece of art. The same thing with the note. Playing a note is not art. Shaping the note is what makes it a piece of art. And in my world, my education world, I call that style. You have different styles. There are different styles appropriate in different kinds of music. What you're saying when you say that is that different note shapes are appropriate in different genres of music. But if you play with no note shape at all, I was listening to a high school symphonic band. And there was no note shape whatsoever. And what a coincidence. Everything was too loud. And it didn't sound like music. It sounded like an hour of notes. I wanted to get out of there because it was disgusting sounding. How can you take such beautifully written music? The computers do a better job today than that. I'm getting emotional. Oh, now, like I said, some guys today get it right. Some guys get it right. And there's other things that are wrong with playing too loud too. It's the tone quality is disgusting. I have to now. This is a long video. I apologize, but it's important. I hope you guys are getting something out of this. I have to pause again so I can take the lid off of my Dutch oven. I'll be right back. So I was talking about the other things that go wrong when you play too loud. Okay, we have already established that you don't have any style because you're playing up to the top of the threshold of your volume. And when you're pinning everything up at that volume, there is no note shape. Okay, but it's worse than that. You also get an inferior sound when you play like that. Now, this same thing happens in the classical world, believe it or not, when people make sound a priority over expression. But that's a video for, I think I talked about that recently. This can also lead to a lack of note shape because they diminished the note shape. Because if you play too loud, you get a less pure sound. If you play too soft, you get a less pure sound. So they try to reduce the extremes, which makes it less expressive. So it's sort of the same thing, but for a different reason. So yes, there's other things that come, other negative things that come with playing too loud. There's also the balance thing. I said in a recent video that I don't believe that a lot of the modern players today even care about balance. That might have something to do with PA systems and stuff like that. But it used to be that balance was up there with intonation and phrasing and style and all that stuff. But that's one of those issues that has gone away. Now let me tell you this. I'm going to end with this. Playing with a better swing feel is harder. It's easier to play the lead trumpet part when you're playing too loud. It's easier to get the notes. It's easier to... So let me tell you what happens. Because I overemphasize, and I do sometimes overemphasize, I sometimes swing too hard. I was in a recording session one time. I used to do these Miss America pageant backing tracks. And the guy told me, Eddie, now he didn't use this terminology, but he basically told me, Eddie, you're swinging too hard. Can you back off on that a little bit? And I did. I can. But to me, it sounds so much better when you swing real hard like that. And that's why I was so well accepted with Connor Johnson, is because of my swing feel, right? And same thing with Dennis Dodson. Anyway, but I want to end with this. It's harder. When you play with better note shape, you're more likely to crack notes. Because the note is a moving target. The more you shape the note, the more the resistance changes. The air changes, so you have to adjust the resistance to match that air change. And sometimes you get it wrong and you crack the note. You also get, in pieces of your music, you get an inferior sound because you're putting expression first. So now, of course, you want to be able to do it without cracking the note. You want to be able to do it without getting an inferior sound. But the truth is, if you take the easy way out and just play loud all the time, that's actually easier. It really is. So, and I do believe that playing lead the way that I play lead is more artistic. It's more expressive. It's like that proverbial stone that's been chipped away into a piece of art. And the people who play, I know I'm repeating myself, the people who play without any note shape It's like taking a boulder and putting it in a room and saying, that's my piece of art. I hope that makes sense. Now, I started off the video talking about Jimmy Brennan. Jimmy, when I was playing with Jimmy, he was farther along in his lead trumpet career than I am now. And I'm sort of like at the end of my lead trumpet, just because there's so many of these other guys out there and I don't like to play lead, right? And so when I played with Jimmy, his chops weren't what they used to be. And he would always be on the gig apologizing to me for his chops. And I understand that part of it, right? If you once had great chops, and now you don't have those chops anymore, I can understand being self-conscious about that. But let me tell you about this. I used to say, Jimmy, I mean, he had a range up to high C, right? Maybe he wasn't as loud as he used to be, or maybe he didn't have enough the same power that he used to have, but he was, and you guys know me, I don't just say stuff like this. He was the best lead player I ever worked with. Okay, well, on a regular basis. I did get to work with one gig. I played a gig with Frank Sinatra Jr., and he brought his father's lead trumpet player. The guy that has the cases named after him, Walt Johnson. Is that him? I think it's Walt Johnson. I got to play one gig with Walt Johnson, so that I would have to say he's the best lead player I ever played with. But on a local basis, I would say Jimmy was the best lead player I played with, and that's why. The stuff I'm talking about, he was doing all of that. And it wasn't just loud, blah, 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 blah kind of playing. He had that sculpture of the notes, not just the big boulder. And so that's why I'm dedicating this video to him, that he was the perfect example of all the things I'm talking about. I don't know if I think he's still teaching lessons in the Clear Lake area, I think. I don't know. But yes, this video is dedicated to Jimmy. All right. Well, that's what I've got to say. A little bit longer than I expected to go. God bless you guys, and we'll see you on the next video.